The morning was cool, and a thin layer of fog floated over the grass. Michael parked his car outside the small cemetery and sat there for a moment with the engine off. The world was still half asleep. No one walked down the quiet street, no dogs barked, and the only sound was the ticking of his cooling engine. He liked it this way. Mornings like this felt private, as if time paused just for him. He reached over to the passenger seat, where a bundle of fresh lilies lay wrapped in brown paper. His father had always loved lilies, saying they were simple but beautiful. Like life when you strip away the noise, he used to say. Michael stepped out, feeling the dampness of the ground through his shoes. The iron gate of the cemetery creaked softly when he pushed it open. He walked down the narrow gravel path, his breath making small clouds in the cold air. The headstones stood in neat rows, each carrying a name, each holding a story. He passed by familiar markers, people he'd known as a boy, neighbors who had gone long before their time, and old friends of his father. His father's grave was near the back, under a large oak tree that was older than anyone in the town. Its branches stretched out wide, offering shade in summer and a kind of shelter all year round. As he approached, Michael slowed his steps. He always did this, a small pause before facing the stone that carried his father's name. It gave him a chance to gather himself, to let his mind settle before speaking to him. He knelt down, brushing away a few fallen leaves that had landed on the headstone. The marble felt cold under his fingertips. "Hey, Dad," he said quietly, almost in a whisper. "I brought your favorites." He set the lilies in the small metal vase fixed to the ground and adjusted them until they sat just right. Then he leaned back, resting his hands on his knees, looking at the name carved deep into the stone. William Carter, 1954-2018, Michael. Thought about how many times he had been here in the last 7 years. Too many to count. Yet it never got easier. In some ways, the pain had dulled, but in others, it was sharper than ever. The silence of the cemetery seemed to wrap around him, making the space feel even more intimate. It was just him and his father, or at least that's how he felt. He spoke slowly, telling his father about the little things in his life. How work had been exhausting lately, how his sister, Emily, had finally moved into her new house. How Mom was doing better these days, though she still kept the old armchair in the living room exactly where it was when Dad used to sit in it. Michael smiled faintly at that. "She says it's your chair forever," he murmured. The air smelled faintly of wet earth and fallen leaves. A bird landed on one of the branches above, chirped once, and then flew away. Michael liked these small interruptions. They reminded him that life kept moving, even here. He reached out and ran his fingers over the carved letters again, feeling the grooves like he was tracing his father's handwriting. For a moment, he closed his eyes. Memories came easily here. He saw himself as a boy, sitting in the passenger seat of his father's old truck, listening to the radio on a summer evening. He remembered fishing trips, long talks on the porch, and the way his father would always know when something was wrong, even if Michael hadn't said a word. That was the thing about his dad. He had a way of listening without rushing, without judging. Michael sighed and leaned back, resting his palms flat on the cool grass. "I wish you were still here," he said softly. "There's so much I didn't get to tell you. So much I thought I'd have time for." His voice caught slightly, but he took a deep breath to steady himself. The wind picked up just enough to make the branches sway, sending a few more leaves drifting to the ground. Michael glanced around. The cemetery was empty, just as he liked it. No footsteps, no distant chatter, no sounds of cars from the road. It was as though the world had stepped aside to let him have this time alone. He thought about the promise he had once made to his father and to take care of the family no matter what. It was a promise he had kept as best as he could, but there were days when it felt heavy, almost too heavy to carry. Sometimes he wondered what his father would say if he were standing here now. Would he be proud? Would he tell him to slow down? Michael stayed there for a while, talking quietly, pausing between sentences like his father might answer. He knew it was one-sided, but it made him feel closer. The grass was damp under his knees, and the cool air made his fingers numb, yet he didn't mind. A sudden gust of wind rustled the leaves in the oak tree above. He pulled his jacket a little tighter and shifted his position. The sky was slowly turning brighter, the pale morning light spilling across the headstones. The peacefulness of it made him want to stay longer. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small photograph. It was a picture of him and his father taken years ago at the lake. They were both laughing, their hair messy from the wind, holding fishing rods. Michael placed the photo against the base of the headstone, securing it under a small stone so it wouldn't blow away. "I thought you'd like to have this," he said quietly. For a long moment he just sat there, letting the quiet wrap around him again. He could hear his own breathing, steady and slow, and the occasional creak of the tree branches above. This was his ritual, one he never rushed. Visiting the grave wasn't just about remembering. It was about keeping a conversation alive. Even if it only went one way, Michael felt a sense of calm, a feeling he only found here. It was like being in a safe place where the noise of the world couldn't reach him. He didn't know how long he'd been sitting there, but time didn't matter. It never did when he came to see his father. Then, just as he was about to speak, again a faint sound caught his ear. So soft he almost thought he imagined it. Michael sat still for a moment, his ears straining. The sound had been faint, almost like a whisper carried on the wind. At first he thought it might have been the leaves shifting, or a bird hidden in the branches above. He waited, his gaze moving, slowly around the empty cemetery. Everything seemed as quiet as before. The air felt heavy with stillness, and the morning fog was lifting, revealing more of the gravestones stretching into the distance. He let out a slow breath and turned his eyes back to the headstone, brushing away a small patch of moss from the corner. But just as he leaned forward, there it was again, a low, soft voice calling his name. It was so unexpected that his heart gave a quick, hard beat against his chest. It couldn't be. The voice sounded familiar in a way that reached deep into his memory, a tone he hadn't heard in years. It wasn't just the sound of his name. It was the way it was spoken. A gentle rise at the end, almost like a question, as if the speaker wanted to be sure they had his attention. That small detail stirred something in him. Michael straightened up, glancing over his shoulder. His eyes scanned the narrow paths between the graves, the distant stone benches, the shadowed spaces under the trees. No one was there. He stood slowly, feeling the cool dampness on his knees from the grass. He turned in a slow circle, trying to catch any movement, but the cemetery looked exactly as it had when he first arrived. His mind ran through possibilities. Could it be a groundskeeper? A morning visitor like him? Maybe someone talking on the phone outside the cemetery gates, and the sound had carried inside. But deep down, the familiarity of that voice unsettled him. It wasn't just anyone's voice. The breeze shifted again, and Michael tightened his jacket around himself. He took a few steps away from the grave, toward the path he'd walked earlier. The air was cooler away from the oak tree's shelter. He listened hard, his feet crunching lightly on the gravel. The morning light was growing stronger now, and shadows moved as the wind stirred the branches. Then the voice came again, louder this time, clearer, and there was no mistaking it now. It sounded exactly like his father's best friend, Daniel. Michael froze in place. He hadn't seen Daniel in over 15 years. The last time had been at the funeral, when emotions were raw and conversations were brief. After that, life had pulled them in separate directions. There had been no phone calls, no letters, not even a passing hello in town. Michael had almost stopped thinking about him altogether. His first reaction was disbelief. Why would Daniel be here of all days, at this early hour? And why hadn't Michael seen him when he entered? The path was narrow and the cemetery wasn't large. If someone had been here, he should have noticed. He swallowed hard, his pulse picking up. "Hello?" he called softly, not wanting to break the quiet too much. His voice carried across the grass, but there was no immediate reply. Michael hesitated, torn between staying where he was and following the direction he thought the voice had come from. He glanced back at his father's grave, the lilies still standing neatly in the vase. Then he turned toward a row of headstones to the right, where the trees grew thicker and the sunlight hadn't fully reached. He moved slowly, his shoes brushing against the damp grass. Every step seemed louder than usual, and his senses felt sharper, as if the air itself was holding its breath. He passed by old gravestones with faded names, some leaning slightly as if tired from standing for decades. The wind rustled again, carrying the faint scent of pine from the trees beyond the cemetery fence. Michael paused near a stone bench, his eyes scanning ahead. He thought he saw a shape moving between the graves, tall, broad-shouldered, walking, with a steady pace. It wasn't close enough to see clearly, but the outline stirred a memory. That walk, that posture. He had seen it so many times in his childhood, back when Daniel used to visit their home. The voice came again, closer now. "Michael!" This time, the sound was so near that it sent a shiver down his spine. It was almost exactly as he remembered. From years ago, warm, steady, and carrying a note of care. He found himself stepping forward before he had even decided to. His curiosity, mixed with the pull of familiarity, was stronger than his hesitation. As he walked, his mind flickered with old images. Daniel and his father working on the old truck together. Daniel sitting at their kitchen table, telling stories. That made everyone laugh. Daniel patting him on the shoulder whenever Michael passed his chair, a small gesture that had once meant safety and reassurance. Michael's pace quickened, though he still felt unsure. The sun was breaking through the last of the fog, making the grass glisten in the light. He reached a corner of the cemetery where the path curved sharply. Beyond it, the graves stood closer together, and the shade from the trees made the space feel almost like a hidden pocket. Just as he stepped around the curve, he stopped dead in his tracks. There, standing a few paces ahead, was a man. His back was turned, but even from behind, Michael knew. The slope of the shoulders, the way his hands rested in his pockets, it was unmistakable. Michael's breath caught, and his thoughts tangled, in disbelief. 15 years without a single meeting, and now here they were, in the same quiet place, both visiting the same man who had been important to them. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out yet. The moment felt fragile, like breaking the silence too suddenly might shatter it. The man turned slowly, as if he already knew who stood behind him. Michael saw his face in the soft morning light and felt his breath catch in his chest. It was Daniel. The hair that had once been thick and dark was now silver at the temples, and fine lines marked the corners of his eyes, but the eyes themselves were the same, calm, steady, and kind. For a second, they only stared at each other, both unsure of what to say. Then Daniel's mouth curved into a small, surprised smile. "Michael?" he said, and the way he said it, that gentle rise at the end, the careful tone, reached right into Michael's memory and warmed something there. "It's you," Michael said, almost in a whisper. He took a step closer, then stopped, not wanting to break the fragile feeling in the air. "I thought I was alone." "So did I," Daniel said, his voice low and even. "I come early. Old habit, I guess." He glanced past Michael for a moment, toward the oak tree where the lilies stood at the base of the headstone. "You visit Him often? Michael nodded, still catching up to the moment. I do. Mostly mornings like this. He tried to smile, but emotion made it a little unsteady. I heard you say my name. It sounded just like before. Daniel gave a quiet, almost shy laugh. I was talking to him, he said, motioning with a tilt of his head, telling him the latest. I said your name and, well, here you are. The two of them stood like that for a moment, halfway between surprise and the need to talk. Finally, Daniel stepped forward and held out his hand. Michael took it, feeling the strong, familiar grip. Before either of them could think too much about it, they moved into a brief hug, one of those half-awkward, half-honest embraces that said more than words could yet carry. When they pulled back, they were both blinking, not sure if it was the cool air or the sudden rush of old feelings. Do you want to sit? Daniel asked, nodding toward a stone bench nearby that faced the oak. We can talk for a minute, if you're not in a hurry. I'm not, Michael said. He followed Daniel to the bench, and they sat with a small space between them, like two people sharing a quiet bus stop. The grass was still wet, and the light was getting brighter, gently lifting the shadows from the grave markers. A bird landed on the lowest branch of the oak and then hopped twice to a higher one as if it were climbing a tiny staircase. You look well, Daniel said, turning to study Michael's face. Older, of course. I mean that in a good way. Stronger. Michael let out a small laugh. I feel older, that's for sure. Work keeps me busy. Mom is doing better now. Emily moved into a new place. He paused. I keep thinking how much he would have liked to see it all. He would have, Daniel said, and his eyes softened. He used to say, watching the kids grow up is my favorite show. He meant it. He talked about you all the time. You were around for a lot of that, Michael said. When I was a kid, you were at the house almost every week. You and Dad working on the old truck. I remember the way you both laughed when the radio wouldn't cooperate and you hit the dashboard with your hand and it suddenly worked. Daniel chuckled. That truck had a personality. Your dad said it liked to be treated like a person, patient but firm. He glanced down at his hands for a moment and then looked back toward the oak. He made hard things look easy. Not because they were easy, but because he took his time. He didn't rush. Michael felt a tightness in his throat and nodded. He listened better than anyone. He could tell when something was wrong before I said a word. He drew a slow breath. After the funeral, everything got blurry. I remember you there, and then, I don't know. Life pulled us apart. It did, Daniel said. The words were simple, but the way he said them held weight. There were a lot of moving parts. I wasn't sure if I should step in or step back. Sometimes stepping back felt like the kinder choice. Other times it felt like the easier one. I still think about that. Michael was quiet. He watched a patch of sunlight creep across the grass, like a soft hand smoothing out wrinkles. I wondered if you were angry at us, or at me. No, Daniel said at once, and the firmness surprised both of them. He lowered his voice. No, not angry. Just careful, and maybe a little unsure. I didn't want to make a hard time harder. They sat with that for a moment. A light breeze shook the leaves above them, and a few floated down, landing soundlessly in the damp grass. Somewhere beyond the fence, a car drove by with a gentle hum and then was gone. Daniel reached down to a small canvas bag by his feet and pulled out a thermos and 2 paper cups. I bring coffee sometimes, he said with a modest smile. Another old habit. Your dad always said good talks start better with something warm. Michael smiled. He did say that. He accepted the cup and Daniel poured. The steam rose in the cool air, and for a moment, the two of them did nothing but hold the warmth and breathe in the mild scent. It felt like sitting on a porch in a different year. I heard you say my name, Michael said after a sip. It sounded like you were asking a question. I was, Daniel said. I ask him questions a lot. I ask him how you're doing. I ask him if he thinks I'm still on the right path. I ask him to forgive me for the times I wasn't there. He stopped and then added, I ask him to keep me honest. Michael watched the side of Daniel's face, the strong line of his jaw, the softened eyes. I didn't know you still came here. I do, Daniel said. Not every week, but often. Early mornings. It's quiet and I can hear my own thoughts. He gave a small nod toward the oak. This tree helps. Your dad liked sitting under big trees. He said they reminded him what patience looked like. He told me that too, Michael said, and the shared memory made a warm thread between them. I used to think he said it just for me. He said it for the people he loved, Daniel replied gently. He told me to be patient with myself. I'm still learning how. They fell into a pause that wasn't empty. It was the kind of silence that lets small truths settle in. Michael looked at the lilies he had set in the vase. They were bright and clean against the gray of the stone. He felt grateful he had chosen them today. I've been tired, Michael said, surprising himself with the sudden honesty. Work, family, the little storms that show up at the worst time. Sometimes I worry I'm not doing enough. I made a promise to take care of them. Some days I feel strong. Other days I feel like I'm barely keeping up. Daniel listened. Really listened. The way Michael's father used to. He didn't jump in or fill the space. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. Your father never asked you to be perfect. He asked you to be present. There's a big difference. Being present is showing up when it matters, even if you don't have all the answers. Michael let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. I needed to hear that. He would say the same, Daniel added. He would tell you that carrying everything alone is not strength. It's a kind of silence. He wanted you to share the load. Michael turned to him. Did he tell you that? Daniel's eyes held a quiet, steady light. He told me many things. He took another sip of coffee, then set the cup down on the bench. There's more I should say, but I don't want to rush it. He lifted his gaze to the stone under the oak. Maybe we should go to him first. They stood and walked the few steps to the headstone together. The lilies stirred in the breeze, as if they were listening too. Michael stood on one side, Daniel on the other. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Daniel touched the edge of the stone with 2 fingers, a simple, respectful gesture. Hey, Will, Daniel said softly, and the name felt like a key turning in an old lock. I think you know who's here with me. He smiled a little, eyes bright with feeling. Your boy looks good. He stands straight. He's doing his best. You'd be proud. Michael felt his throat tighten again. He stared at the letters carved in the stone, the years that marked a full life. He had said many things here in the last 7 years, but hearing Daniel speak like this, in that familiar, steady tone, opened a new door inside him. I didn't expect today to be any different, Michael said, his voice low. But it is. That's how mornings work, Daniel said. They pretend to be the same, and then they change everything. A gentle sound of laughter escaped. Michael, even as his eyes grew damp. You always had a way with lines. I borrowed most of them from him, Daniel said, nodding toward the name on the stone. He had a way of making things simple. He used to tell me, be kind first, be right later. I've been trying to remember that. Michael let the words rest on the air. He thought of the last conversation with his father, the unfinished sentences, the promise that had felt so big. Standing here with Daniel, the promise didn't feel smaller, but it felt shared, like it had room to breathe. Daniel, he said after a while, why today? After all these years, why did our paths cross here this morning? Daniel looked at him and then back at the stone. Maybe because it was time, he said softly. Maybe because I said your name out loud and meant it with my whole heart. Maybe because your father liked to bring people together more than anything. He paused, and something unreadable moved across his face. Not secretive, just careful. And maybe because there's a piece of the story I haven't told you yet. Michael waited, alert and calm at the same time. The air felt a little warmer, the light a little clearer. The bird in the oak hopped once more, then spread its wings and lifted off, leaving the branch lighter than before. I don't want to rush, Daniel said to himself. Daniel drew a breath like someone about to open a careful door. I promised your father, he said at last. His voice was steady, but there was a softness underneath, the kind that comes when a person has carried a thought for a long time. It was one of the last long talks we had. He asked me to look out for you and your family in the ways I could, not to replace him, just to be there when it mattered. Michael's hands warmed around the paper cup. He didn't rush him. The morning was bright now, but there was still a hush around the oak, as if the tree was listening too. How did he ask you? Michael said gently. On your back porch, Daniel said, a tiny smile touching his lips. It was late. The kitchen light was on and the rest of the house was quiet. He had that blanket across his knees, the blue, one with the white lines, and we sat there listening to the night sounds. He kept looking at the stars like they were giving him instructions. Daniel's eyes grew a little distant. He said, If I can't be around to steady him, you'll know how. You'll know when to speak and when to listen. Then he squeezed my hand. He didn't squeeze hard. He didn't need to. Michael felt something loosen in his chest. He pictured his father on the porch under the light, the blanket, the casual way he rested one ankle on his other knee. He pictured Daniel there, too, maybe holding his own cup, both of them watching the dark backyard where the night insects sang. The image felt so clear, it was almost like a new memory had formed. Daniel reached down to the canvas bag at his feet. He lifted it to his lap and unfastened the small brass buckle. Inside was a neat stack wrapped in brown paper and tied with a twine bow. He undid the twine slowly, not out of drama, but out of care. Under the paper lay a small, worn notebook with a blue cover, a bundle of sealed envelopes with handwriting on them, and a thin wooden box the size of a pencil case. I've kept these. Safe, Daniel said, touching the notebook with 2 fingers. Your dad gave them to me. He said to hold on to them until you were ready. He didn't say a date. He said I'd know by the look in your eyes. His mouth curved with an apologetic kindness. I think today is the day. Michael stared at the items with a quiet awe. The envelopes had his name written in his father's hand, the letters familiar and slightly slanted, the way they used to look on lunchbox notes and birthday cards. One envelope simply said, For Michael, when the morning feels steady. Another said, Open after you've had some coffee. The small blue notebook had a crease down the middle as if it had lived in a jacket pocket for a long time. Can I? Michael asked, not finishing the sentence because the rest was obvious. They're yours, Daniel said, and he placed the stack gently in Michael's hands. The weight was light, but the meaning was not. We can read something now, if you want, or you can keep them until later. There's no wrong way. Michael's thumb moved across the edge of the notebook. He opened the cover slowly. Inside, the first page held a short list written in pencil, the lines simple and practical. Drink water before you do anything else today. Call your mother, even if it's just to hear her breathe and say, mm-hmm. Fix the squeaky hinge. It's like a tiny voice asking for help. Laugh at least once, even if it's at your own joke. Be kind first. Be right later. Michael made a soft sound that was half a laugh, half a sigh. He really wrote this, he said, feeling the small tremor of surprise that comes with holding something you didn't know you'd missed. He turned the page. On the second page, there was a short paragraph. If you are reading this, it means a morning came when you didn't rush your sadness. Thank you for that. It's good practice for everything else. He closed the notebook, just to breathe for a second. His eyes were damp, but the tears didn't feel heavy. They felt clean, like rain that clears the air. He set the notebook on his knee and picked up the plain envelope that said, "For Michael. When the morning feels steady." He didn't open it yet. He held it up to the light and saw the shape of paper inside. Nothing more. It was enough to know the words were there, waiting. Daniel sat in quiet, giving him the kind of space his father had always given. "I used to worry I waited too long," Daniel said softly. "Every time I came here, I asked him if I should try to find you, to hand these over sooner. Then I would think about the day of the funeral. Everything was sharp and tender at once. I wasn't sure if my knocking at the door would help or just make more noise." Michael nodded. He remembered the day clearly, the crowd, the food, the whispered instructions for where to put coats. Everyone had said kind things, and it had all sounded like one long, careful note. "I remember," he said. "I remember you were there, and then I remember you weren't. After that, the days blurred. Sometimes I thought maybe you were angry. Other times I thought you were just giving us room." "I was giving room," Daniel said. "And I was a little afraid, not of you, of doing the wrong thing. I wanted to show up the way he would have wanted." He glanced at the notebook with a soft grin. "He would probably tell me I made it more complicated than it needed to be." Michael smiled, and the smile stayed. He would say that. And then he'd hand you a screwdriver and say, "Fix this while we talk so you don't overthink it." "That sounds exactly like him," Daniel said, his eyes bright. He liked to keep hands busy so hearts could speak. They both looked at the headstone under the oak. The lilies Michael had placed stood fresh and white, their green stems straight in the small metal vase. A pair of leaves skated across the grass on a thin breeze and then lay still. "What's in the wooden box?" Michael asked after a moment. Daniel rested his palm on it. "It's a small thing, not the main thing. It's a tool he liked to keep near." He paused, as if measuring whether to open it now. "We can look now, or later. There's also something else, a story about the old truck. But that part can wait until you've had time with the letters." Michael felt a warm curiosity rise. The old truck had been a part of his life like another family member, stubborn and faithful. He knew at once that whatever the story was, it would be better received after the words in the envelopes had settled. "Later is okay," he said. "I want to hear the story the way you want to tell it. Today can hold it all, but it doesn't need to hold it all at once." Daniel's shoulders eased, as if a small weight had been lifted. "Thank you," he said simply. Michael looked down at the envelope again. He slid his finger under the edge and stopped, feeling a sudden caution. There was no urgency. The letter had waited this long. It could wait another hour. It felt right to open it in a quiet place at home, perhaps at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and the window open. He slipped the envelope into the inside pocket of his jacket, where it rested close to his heart. "Tell me about that last porch talk," Michael said. "What did he say before he asked you to look out for us?" Daniel's voice found a gentle rhythm. "He talked about small things. He said the tomatoes were late that year. He complained about the squeaky hinge on the screen door and then smiled because he liked the sound anyway. He told me the bird that used to tap the window finally found a mate and stopped tapping. He said the best part of a day is when he heard your car pull into the drive and knew you were home safe." Daniel paused. Then he said, "I don't like leaving a mess for other people to clean up." He didn't mean the house. He meant feelings. He wanted to leave clear paths. Michael stared at the grass, feeling the truth of that line settle into him. He did leave clear paths, he said, even when I didn't understand them at the time. He knew you would, Daniel said. He had a good map of you. He trusted your sense of direction more than you do. They stood together again, almost without deciding to, and walked a slow loop along the narrow path that curved around the oak. The stones made a soft crunch under their shoes. Names passed by them like quiet introductions. People from the town, some known, some unknown. Daniel pointed to a stone with ivy growing around the base. Your dad and I helped set that one, he said. We weren't strong enough to lift it alone, so we made a little ramp and slid it. He said, never lift what you can roll. He turned even that into a lesson. Michael laughed softly. He had a lesson for everything. He kept them simple on purpose, Daniel said. He thought simple things lasted longer because people could carry them easier. They reached the bench again and sat. Michael placed the notebook beside his cup and looked at Daniel. You said you asked him to forgive you sometimes, he said. For what? For distance, Daniel said, telling the truth without apology. For the times I got quiet when I should have spoken. For wanting things to be neat. Life isn't neat. He forgave me while I was still asking. A small smile crossed his face. He said, save your apologies for when you've actually done harm. The rest is weather. It helped me keep moving. Michael took that in. He thought of all the small storms he had walked through in the years since the funeral. Bills, holidays, birthdays that felt both full and incomplete. He thought of the days he had felt strong and the days he had felt like a thin wire stretched too tight. I carried a lot alone, he said quietly. Some of that was choice. Some was habit. You don't have to keep doing it the same way, Daniel said. You can widen the path. Invite people in. I'm here now. I can help. Michael looked at him and nodded. The nod was not big, but it was sure. I want that, he said. I think he wanted that for us. He did. Daniel rested his hand on the wooden box for a moment, as if asking it for permission. Then he lifted the lid. Inside lay a single old-fashioned key on a small leather tag. The leather was worn smooth from years of use, and there was a tiny mark on the side where someone had once scratched a tiny star. Michael knew the star. He had watched his father make that mark with a nail when he was 10. He had asked why, and his father had smiled and said, so the key can find its way back to us. Seeing it now made the morning feel even more real. Daniel looked up, meeting Michael's eyes. Your father asked me to look after the truck, he said quietly. After the service, when the house was full of people, he had already made a plan with me. He didn't tell you then because everything was too heavy and too new. He asked me to hold the key for a while. He said I would know when to give it to you. He said I would know when you were ready to carry it with joy, not only with weight. Michael touched the edge of the box, careful and slow. You still have the truck? His voice was soft, small with surprise and hope. I do, Daniel said. It's in my barn. I kept it dry. I turned the engine every month so it would not freeze up. I changed the oil each spring. I replaced the tires last year when the rubber looked tired. It's not perfect, but it's still itself. It still smells like summer and work and good afternoons. Michael let out a breath that sounded like he had been holding it for years. His father's truck had felt like a member of the family. He had ridden in it to school plays, to the hardware store, to the lake where they took the picture he had left at the grave. He had fallen asleep on long drives with his head against the window and woken to his father's voice saying, home. The idea of the truck still waiting somewhere safe and quiet made his chest warm. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Michael asked, not in anger, but in the simple wish to understand. Daniel nodded, ready for the question. 2 reasons, he said. First, I wanted to give you time. Grief has its own clocks, and none of them match the ones on our walls. Second, your father asked me to wait until the day felt calm inside you. He said there would be a morning when your voice was steady again, when you could see the gift as a piece of love, not as another task. He wanted this to feel like a door opening, not a door closing. This morning, when I said your name, I heard that steadiness in you. Michael looked toward the oak and the lilies and the neat letters of his father's name. The sunlight had moved higher, and the shadow of the tree had shifted, wrapping the headstone in a soft line of shade like a gentle hand. He always planned with kindness, Michael said, even when the plan took time. Daniel smiled. He did. And he trusted us to keep the plan safe. He held out the key. If you want it, it's yours. If you want to wait, that's all right too. I will hold it as long as needed. There is no rush. Michael took the key with both hands. It felt cool and familiar. He turned it over, tracing the tiny star with his thumb. I want it, he said, and then added, I want to do this the way he would like. Not fast, not perfect. Together. He looked at Daniel. Will you help me bring it back to life? I would be honored, Daniel said. The words came out steady and true. I hoped you would ask. I know a dozen small things that need doing. None of them are difficult. They just need patient hands. We can do them one by one. We can talk while we work. Your father believed that fixing a good thing is another kind of prayer. They both laughed softly, because it sounded exactly like something his father would say. The laugh did not erase the sadness, but it gave it a kinder shape. It made room for joy to sit down beside it. I used to visit every month, Daniel said after a moment, glancing toward the headstone. I came early like you. I would stand here and tell him about the weather, about your family, about the truck. I would tell him what I fixed and what I still needed to learn. Sometimes I felt silly, talking to a stone. But then the wind would move the leaves, or a bird would land near, or the morning would go quiet in that special way. And I would feel, listen to. I think he made this place a porch for us. Michael nodded slowly. I think he did. He remembered how the porch had always been the place for honest talks. Not the kitchen, not the living room, but the porch where the air could carry away the hard parts and bring back the soft ones. Thank you for coming all those months, he said, even when we were strangers by accident. We were never strangers, Daniel said, just far for a while. He looked at the key in Michael's hand and then back at his face. Would you like to come by this weekend? We can roll the truck into the light. We can see what it needs. We can make a list. I will make coffee. You can bring your favorite, music, and we can let it play while we work. I would like that, Michael said. Saturday morning? Early before the day gets busy? Perfect, Daniel said with a small, content nod. Let's say every first Saturday morning for a while. We will keep the rhythm. We will build a good habit. He smiled. Your dad loved good habits. They stood again and returned to the headstone for one last quiet moment before leaving. Michael touched the marble and whispered, We heard you, echoing Daniel's earlier words. He felt calm. He felt ready to carry the morning into the rest of the day. On the walk back to the gate, they talked about small things, where Daniel lived now, which route was best to reach the barn, whether the old radio in the truck might still turn on if they cleaned the knobs, whether the bench under the oak needed a new coat of sealer before winter. The small talk was not a way to avoid the big talk. It was a way to let the big talk breathe. At the cars, they exchanged numbers. The act felt simple and important. Call me if you change your mind, Daniel said. About the time or about anything. I won't change my mind, Michael said. But I will call you anyway. I think we have years to catch up on. They shook hands again. This time, the handshake was not a greeting or a goodbye. It was an agreement. It was a bridge. Driving home, Michael kept the key on the seat beside him, resting on the leather tag like a small, sleeping bird. At a red light, he touched it once and felt that same mix of peace and strength. When he reached his house, he went straight to the kitchen and set the key on the table. He made tea and then pulled the envelope from his jacket pocket, the one that said, "For Michael, when the morning feels steady." He opened it slowly, careful not to tear the edges. The paper inside held a few paragraphs in his father's handwriting. The lines were simple and kind. His father told him he was proud. He told him that tired days are not failing days, that showing up is a kind of success no one claps for, but it counts the most. He reminded him to ask for help when the load is too heavy, because people who love him want to be useful. He ended with a small instruction. When you hold the old key again, do not think about the miles behind you. Think about the miles ahead. They will be kinder than you expect. Michael read the letter twice, then folded it and placed it back in the envelope. He sat for a while with his tea and let his breathing slow. The house felt different. Not louder, not busier. Just more. Alive. Like a window had been opened in a room he didn't know was closed. He called his mother. He told her he had gone to the cemetery early, as he often did, and that something good had happened. He told her he had seen Daniel. He told her about the notebook and the letters, and about the key. She did not speak right away. Then she said, "Your father would be smiling so big right now." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Bring the notebook by later," she added. "I'll make something warm and we can read a page together." "I will," Michael said. He felt grateful for the clear path ahead. He also texted his sister Emily a simple message. Saw Daniel at the cemetery. He kept Dad's truck safe. Long story, good story. Call when free. Emily replied with a string of happy tears and a heart. Then, "I knew the truck would find us back." The week moved by in a gentle way. Work still needed him. Bills still came. Errands still filled an afternoon. But something in him had shifted. He slept a little deeper at night. He found himself humming while washing dishes. He cleaned the squeaky hinge on the back door because the notebook had reminded him not to ignore small voices. He placed the key in a small bowl by the door, where he would see it each morning and remember the plan. Saturday came with soft light and a wide sky. Michael drove to Daniel's place with a steady heart. The barn was weathered on the outside, but clean and cared for within. When Daniel slid open the big door, the smell of old wood and machine oil greeted them like an old friend. And there it was, the truck. Dust lay on it like a thin blanket, but the shape was strong. The paint had faded gently, the way a favorite shirt does, but it still carried its color and pride. "Ready?" Daniel asked, a warm spark in his eyes. "Ready," Michael said. He held up the key. "Let's roll it into the light." They worked, side by side, careful and calm. They checked the fluids, wiped the windows, and brushed dust from the dashboard. They cleaned the battery terminals and tightened a loose belt. They spoke of simple things and deep things, letting talk come and go. Daniel told the truck story he had promised, how he and Michael's father had rebuilt the starter one summer with nothing but a repair manual, a borrowed tool, and a whole lot of patience. How they had celebrated with iced tea on the porch while the sun went down. Michael listened, smiled, and added his own memories. Together, that lay